Welcome back. Top officials in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis' 2024 presidential campaign telling donors that a, quote, reset is underway. In a meeting with top contributors on Sunday, they acknowledged too much money has been spent and they're promising more changes to rebound from a disappointing start. Meanwhile, President Trump keeping his commanding lead with GOP primary voters. A new Fox Business poll finds the former president now at 48% in South Carolina. DeSantis is sitting in third place at 13%. In Iowa, meanwhile, Trump is leading with 46%. DeSantis is at 16%. Joining me right now is former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. He's author of the book, March to the Majority. Speaker, it's always a pleasure. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Those are amazing poll numbers. What do you think's going on with
these polls? Yeah, let's talk about it. How do you assess where we are ahead of the debate?
Well, President Trump has half or more of the Republican base, I think, pretty well locked up. I think they're going to stick with him no matter what. The rest is scattered, but what people need to remember is we went through this in 2016, and I think there were a total of 16 candidates. And as they would drop out, people would say, oh, they're all going to go to the non-Trump candidate. That didn't happen. I just talked to one pollster 2 days ago who said that if DeSantis, for example, were to drop out, at least half of his vote would go to Trump. Well, you add that to what Trump already has, and he's back up above 60% against the entire field. So unless something really dramatically happens, I think that Trump is the almost inevitable nominee. No, nothing's totally inevitable in politics, but he certainly has massive advantages going into Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. And he could come out of those four having decisively won the nomination.
Yeah, but Newt, I mean, something extraordinary is happening. He got indicted twice, and he might get indicted a third time. How are these legal issues affecting all of this?
Well, I think he'll be indicted at least 2 more times. He'll be indicted probably, certainly in the District of Columbia, by the totally, I think, partisan Department of Justice, and he may be indicted in Atlanta by an equally partisan Democrat local district attorney. But I think what's happened is in Trump's world, that's interpreted as persecution, not prosecution. And so people believe that this is a deliberate effort, and they look at how the Bidens are treated, they look at how Hillary Clinton was treated, and they say, you know, there's such a gigantic double standard here that you know, how can you possibly believe this is about the criminal justice system? This is an effort to use the law to destroy a political opponent, something which, frankly, has never been done in American history. And it's kind of astonishing that the Democrats are this desperate and that they're willing to manipulate and use the law this decisively. It's an example of the depth of their corruption.
Well, this is a really important point that you're making, and this is why we're looking at these developments around Hunter Biden. Devin Archer, his former business partner, is expected to testify under oath next week. And what we have from Miranda Devine is that Hunter Biden would dial into his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, on speakerphone into meetings with his overseas business partners. This reported by Miranda Devine that Devin Archer is going to discuss next week. Is this ever going to hurt Joe Biden? Even Kevin McCarthy is saying some of this is rising to the levels.
Look, I think when Robert Kennedy Jr. said there has to be an investigation, you saw the beginning of a break in the whole dam. As facts weigh up day after day after day, at some point, the New York Times and the Washington Post and the big media conglomerates are going to realize they're on the wrong side of history. And as they do that, you'll see the tide shift. Already you're seeing a little more coverage of the problems. You're seeing the New York Times beginning to behave as though maybe it's on the wrong side of these things. The Devin Archer, if he comes in, and again, the pressure on him to not testify is enormous. But if he does come in and he does say flatly, look, I was in the room, I saw it. There's no question it happened. First of all, it will prove conclusively that Joe Biden has lied to the entire country for years. Second, it'll raise significant questions because so much of this money is foreign money. This isn't just your standard corruption problem. This is a foreign influence buying problem involving the President of the United States. And to the degree, I'm just now reading Ball of Collusion by Andy McCarthy, which was written way back in 2019, and it is astonishing how he takes apart all these things. And one of the things that led me to realize is Biden learned in part from Hillary Clinton. The Clintons used government to raise so much money and it's still never been investigated and should be. The Clinton Foundation became their device for huge amounts, I mean $35 million in one case. So the Bidens in that sense are just kind of, little thieves as compared to the Clintons, who were taking money on a grand scale. But Biden learned from that. You can do it. You can get away with it. There's no legal consequence. So why shouldn't I have the money too? And so you have a guy who, at least since the vice presidency, has been taking money.
Yeah, and that's what the Burisma CEO said, according to these documents, that he said, we always knew Joe Biden was the most corrupt family in Washington and living in the White House, and that says a lot, given that the Clintons lived there. I mean, he actually said that, according to documents that we've got. Meanwhile, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, as I mentioned, escalating talks of impeachment in the face of these investigations into the family business. Here's what the House Speaker said this week. Watch.
If you're sitting in our position today, we would know none of this if Republicans had not taken the majority. We've only followed where the information has taken us. This is rising to the level of impeachment inquiry.
So Newt, where do you think this is going? Do you think we will see an impeachment? And does it matter at this point? What happens then?
Well, I think there's a huge challenge to impeaching and convicting President Biden, and that's Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, no rational person wants her to be president. So you have this dilemma. You may have a corrupt and in some ways cognitively challenged president, but you have a totally inept vice president who would probably be, from this country's standpoint, even more dangerous. I think McCarthy's right, though. They should impanel an impeachment process because that opens up avenues of investigation they don't currently have.
Newt, I know you did a taped podcast with the producer and actor who made The Sound of Freedom, and you were very happy with that. Real quick on that, why was that so important to you?
Well, it's an amazing movie. I'm actually going, Clifton and I are going with Kevin McCarthy tonight. He's hosting a showing of it at the Capitol Hill. It is an important moral statement about the tragedy of children, and I think every American should see The Sound of Freedom.